the updates because it seems that the conflict has now resumed. The tensions in West Asia have escalated rapidly after Iran launched missiles towards Israel. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has claimed that it targeted an Israeli airbase, describing the attack as an retaliation for Israeli strikes on Hezbollah and Lebanon. Now, the IRGC has also warned of more crushing attacks if Israel continues with its military operations in southern Lebanon and Beirut. And the missile launch marked Iran's first direct attack on Israel since agreed to a ceasefire with the United States back in April. Now, these strikes come as the US-Israel war against Iran, which began back on the 28th of February, has already crossed its 100-day mark. And Israel's military says that it successfully intercepted all incoming missiles and no major damage or casualties have been reported so far. Now, in a breaking update, we are learning that Israel has also launched fresh airstrikes on military targets in western and central Iran, despite US warning against it. And this is coming in as far as the appeals from President Trump, urging restraint and warning against further escalation. However, Israeli fighter jets targeted military installations that were said to be linked to the Iranian regime, with explosions that have been reported in several Iranian cities. Well, that seems to be the retaliation that has now taken up. Let's, in the meantime, introduce Srinjoy and Mayank joining us here on the broadcast. We also have Daniel Boardman, a senior journalist with us. Daniel, thank you very much for joining us. Srinjoy, first question, we are looking at the retaliation that has continued. So attack on Lebanon, Iran targets Israel. Israel also now retaliates.
Yes, it's almost like these falling dominoes coming up again. You have Israel attacking the Lebanon, primarily because the Hezbollah there have got themselves new kinds of weaponry, particularly drones. And these drones have been targeting northern Israel. So Israel has been hitting southern Lebanon and increasingly towards Beirut, including Beirut, the capital, after which the Israelis, after which the Iranians decide that, well, if Israel is hitting our allies, we will hit them back. And that's precisely what Iran has done. Iran has hit an Israeli Air Force base, is what Iran is saying. Well, Israel then will hit back, and Israel has hit back.
Yes.
Israel has hit parts of Western Iran, military targets we are hearing, Western Iran and northwestern Iran are areas where Israel has struck.
Yes.
Now, this completely jeopardizes the peace process that President Donald Trump has invested so much time, so much effort on, because this ceasefire has lasted about 100 days or so.
Yes.
If you call it a ceasefire, and you should, because it's a tenuous ceasefire, it's increasingly coming under threat, but it's still a ceasefire. And the President Trump has invested a lot of time and effort in it. And if this ceasefire comes under threat like this, then clearly it will hurt the president, it will hurt the United States.
Well, let me take a quick comment from Daniel on this, because Daniel, what do we understand as far as the current situation? Who's actually calling the shots? Because President Trump says Israel is not, Netanyahu is not, but Netanyahu has retaliated.
Well, I mean, I think everyone calls the shots within their own borders. I mean, to most reasonable people, they can determine that America is a very powerful country, and no one can dictate to America. Now, America has certain pressures it can put upon Israel. It is much more effective when it is positive pressure than sort of negative pressure. Sort of a friendly bear hug is sort of the most effective way at stifling them. But the level that Trump went to today of declaring that Israel would not be allowed on his decreance to respond to an attack on their sovereign territory is insane. It's an insane thing to say. And the Israelis had to respond because they were hit by Iran, and especially in the region they're building and the alliances they're building up, their entire alliance structure would collapse if they didn't hit back. The genesis of the Abraham Accords is when the Arab states were so impressed with Benjamin Netanyahu for standing up to Barack Obama back in the day and showing that actually Israel could be someone to stick up against Western, like U.S. hegemony sometimes. And that's actually what started the Arab dialogue because it was a position of strength. And what Trump's done in the last 2 months has been, you could say, I like the 4D chess analogy. People think he's playing 4D chess. I see this as 16-dimensional chess, which is what happens when you play 4-dimensional chess against yourself. There's just too many dimensions, and he seemed to be undermining and supporting them. So while he tries to manage the domestic political situation and calm oil markets and say it's going to be over any minute.
That means that we'll be back to square one. I mean, then, question what were the main objectives of launching these strikes in the first place? Because the retaliation on Iran and very aggressive retaliation on part of Iran has continued. And we'll just put out, what IRGC has to say, because in a statement they have been saying that Israel used air ballistic missiles in this latest attack. And President Trump reportedly has warned Benjamin Netanyahu to stand down on regional military escalations, explicitly declaring that the Israeli Prime Minister has no choice but to accept whatever agreement that Washington may reach with Iran to end the war in the Middle East. Now, that seems to be the very situation that we are now looking at, because if this warning is not heeded by Prime Minister Netanyahu, because President Trump is of the opinion that they are very close in doing something good in terms of a deal there. But, this would be difficult for Netanyahu to stand down and agree pretty much to this deal, because that means, Mayank, that it may not hit Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. And this is exactly what Iran wants.
See, complication is the word which I can use immediately, because the talks were, the way the things have come up, it might complicate, and connotations which can be, or analysis which can be done is like, is there some kind of a disagreement or discordant views between both as far as Israel and US is concerned? Because immediately after President Donald Trump came out with a statement saying that there was a talk and Israel was supposed to withhold its operations. But then here we see the kind of operations which are taking place. In this case, minded, the two most important points which were to talk to Iran in such a way that it gives away all its rights on enriching the nuclear fissile material. And the second point was opening the Strait of Hormuz is concerned. Now here we see third aspect and third dimension. I need to say that in that manner. Because right from the beginning, when the ceasefire had started, which is 8th of April, when the ceasefire was announced, Iran had come out with this statement saying that they were ready, or the impressions they were giving is that they were ready to give up, or rather forego any kind of agreement, ceasefire agreement, if attacks were taking place on Lebanon. Here we see they have quoted the same reason, saying that, and that thus they launched the missiles which were there. Mind it complicates further, because there were multiple statements made by both US and Israel saying that they had destroyed all kind of air force and naval forces of the Iranians. But here we see, but then the point is drones and missiles, here we see they are profusely being used, because in between there was attacks launched on Kuwait and Qatar also.
And in Bahrain, because Iran doesn't seem to be any showings of backing down or showing any signs of weakness. In fact, it's been putting up a very aggressive show, and this is something in retaliation that we are now looking at. And mainly the sticking point has been, of course, we have seen whether it comes to enriched uranium, then the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, and now protecting Hezbollah as its proxy is something which Iran now seems to be seeking to bring upon a peace deal. And of course, when it comes to the war compensation is something which Iran has also been seeking from the United States. Now, President Trump has been saying that these new strikes by Israel and Iran will not affect his administration's peace talks with Tehran. And this is now coming as Israeli Prime Minister, according to President Trump, is not the one who's calling the shots. He says that it is not going to have any impact on the deal, as he's the one who always calls the shots. So, Srinjoy, is this an understanding that we, get? President Trump wants to have the last word. Prime Minister Netanyahu, of course, we remember the expletive-laden talk, the phone conversation that happened between the two leaders. But Israel is also not showing any signs of backing down either.
President Trump wants the deal. President Trump wants something to happen with Iran. Now, which is why he is telling the world that, well, this is one of those things that has happened. There has been no change as far as the deal with Iran is concerned. That's his position. And he, for a variety of reasons, prices of oil, inflation in America, elections coming up, a lot of things, it does probably feel a little under pressure, because this war and the fog of peace situation, as I call it, since the ceasefire began, this has been going on for a long time. So as a result, there is bound to be exhaustion even in America. Yeah. I mean, who wants their soldiers to be blockading Iranian ports, bombing Iranian military installations, stopping ships from coming in and going out, basically hundreds and thousands of soldiers in that area. Also, some are under threat. 13 soldiers, American soldiers, have died in the fighting. Some more have been injured. More importantly, it is the prices of gasoline are shooting up in America. $4 a gallon is something that the Americans are not very happy with.
As well, because I mean, since weeks after that, we're looking at for the first time that the crude oil prices fell below the $100 per barrel mark. However, it seems that it is again hovering around the same $96 per barrel mark, and this is going to escalate further because the statements that has been coming in. Let's put out this conversation that happened between President Trump and the Israeli Prime Minister. He told Bibi to hold off on launching retaliatory attacks on Iran. He's also warned Netanyahu against escalating the already soaring tensions in the region. And what is being said that the belief that the deal with Iran was near, the call came after Israeli military says that it intercepted wave of missiles fired from Iran for the first time since early April. Now, while Trump and Netanyahu held a fiery conversation last Sunday, however, it similarly, what is being said that Trump had signaled his views in calls with reporters, meaning that his message to Netanyahu was unlikely to have been a surprise to the Prime Minister. So, Daniel, what is your understanding of the situation? Because remember when President Trump returned from China, he was ready for a military strike. Then he said that the Gulf nations, the Gulf leaders warned him against that. And now he wants peace and he wants a deal with Iran. So what are we now looking at? Will diplomacy be given a chance?
I don't think diplomacy has any chance of working, even if Israel never fired a shot at anyone, or the U.S. There is a 0% chance that the Islamic Republic of Iran will willfully give up its nuclear material. There's a 0% chance now in this current climate that they will just cede the Strait of Hormuz with nothing put on them. Again, they've learned that, or they perceive at least, that Donald Trump does not have the will to finish this fight, which is what a lot of critics criticized him. A lot of people who support the Iran war, myself included, can make the case for going up against a fanatical religious dictatorship that wants to obtain nuclear weapons. You see how big of a problem that is for a country like India to have a fanatical religious dictatorship always threatening them with nuclear weapons. So you understand that. But the problem is that last 10%. Everyone knew he'd get 90% of the way through. That was the easy part. It's once you get to the hardened points and you have to do consistent military strikes. And most analysts said it'd be about 3 months, before you see any cracks of constant striking. And he did the thing where he got bored after 1 month and then tried to trump his way through it with a blockade on a blockade. But the problem with a blockade is a contest of wills. And if you do not have the will to suffer through, a 3 times the rise in gas, let's say, to starve out your enemy, you can't win a blockade. Again, blockades are won on sheer will over time. There is no such thing as a quick fix blockade, which is what Trump tried to sell. So ultimately, we're back at square one. If you want to denuclearize Iran, you have to take the nuclear weapons and take the nuclear dust out of Iran. You have to take it from them. And now, if you want to clear the Strait of Hormuz, you have to clear the Strait of Hormuz. You have to send Marines into the Strait, shoot the Iranians defending the Strait, and physically hold the ground to clear it, then negotiate.
That looks like a big military escalation in this operation, Daniel, you seems to be suggesting that, because if that certainly happens, then this war is going to cost a lot. I mean, it's going to be even more devastating than the previous 40 days of conflict or 40 days of conflict that was earlier witnessed before the April ceasefire. But, when it comes to the conflict, because it is very clear to see that as far as the reasons behind the strikes on Iran is concerned, which are very different, the very different objectives which United States has a very different objective that Israel has, because for Israel it is about its own existence. So reports have now been saying that Trump has urged Israel to show restraint and avoid further military action to prevent the situation from getting worse. Now remember, Israel never wanted a ceasefire. It wanted the US to continue with its military operations on Iran. And Israel, however, has been asked not to carry out strikes against Iran for now, easing concerns about a larger conflict in the region. Now the situation that remains tense and could change quickly, because that seems to be the retaliation. I mean, Mayank, we've seen that coming in from the Iranian side. Iran has said then, you know, if the aggressor hits us again, then the fight will not just remain restrained to the Gulf nations. We've seen the attack coming on Kuwait and, Bahrain. It could, even widen to other regions beyond the Gulf.
Well, Iranian operations have been always targeting any kind of infrastructure or base which were in support of operations which started on 28th of Feb. Mind it. But are we going to see some kind of a sign wherein Epic Fury will be a separate operation and the Roaring Lion will be a separate operation? I mean, it is from Israel's side actually. So, I mean, these are the things which we need to wait and watch, because these are getting interesting further. But what you brought out importantly is that the world had already been suffering, and as we had been describing in times now that bombs were falling in Middle East, but then the ripples were being felt across the globe. And herein, stopping the movement in Strait of Hormuz had created major problem, which included for India and largely for the globe and Asia in particular. So what we see interestingly, and by striking by using missiles the way Iran has been using, we can easily see that they have got other ways and means by which they will be carrying out the attacks. And in this case, what is important is actually they did not attack any base or facility in the Middle East, because that was easier for them. And here they have used chosen targets in Israel, and Ramat David is the airbase which is being reported to have been attacked by the missiles from the Israel. So here we see it can pick up escalation, and that would create or reel the world further into more complications. Right. And ceasefire is already under some kind of a complicated state, as we can see, Amita.
Well, very fragile. That we have been seeing that from the day itself that the ceasefire was announced, because there had been sporadic incidents or bursts of aggression, as Shinjoy puts it across, as far as we have seen the kind of aggression that has been seen from all three sides. US has been also acting in what it calls as self-defense strikes. Let's get you the footages that are now coming in, because these strikes that have now been conducted, this retaliation on part of Israel, what has now been said that in several Iranian cities, there has been strikes that has been conducted on part of Israel, and attack that has now been reported in Iran's Malad, where smoke that seems to be billowing over Iran's Malad, which is an Iranian city that has now been targeted following Israeli airstrikes in the area. So in Isfahan, we're looking at Tehran, we're looking at other cities as well that have now been attacked on part of Israel in these counter strikes that has now been taken up. And Israel's attack on Beirut just days after, Lebanese and Israeli governments agreed to a ceasefire in the US hosted talks as well. However, Hezbollah had rejected the deal, but for Hezbollah's cover, Iran had come forward saying that any attack on the resistance, any attack on its proxy, which is Hezbollah, will renew the attack on Israel. And Iran has now warned that an attack on Beirut would renew full-scale war across the Middle East, even as Pakistan and other mediators try to restart talks between Tehran and Washington. So as far as US forces are also concerned, they say that they stay vigilant across Middle East and are ready. As far as the threat to the Gulf bases of the United States also remains another possible target for Iran. So this is now coming across as another development there. There you can see the city in Malad, it has now been said in Iran, where loud explosions that has been heard. We're looking at pictures that are also coming in from Tehran. We're looking at pictures coming in from Tabriz, and we're looking at pictures coming in from Isfahan. Daniel, what do you make of this retaliation now coming in from Israel's side? Because these are mainly cities, as far as areas within Iran are concerned, deep inside Iran, that are now being hit.
Yeah, I mean, Israel's shown the ability to hit anywhere they want inside Iran for the last 2 years now, since the first time Iran fired ballistic missiles at them. So we'll have to wait to see what was hit. I assume, the Israelis tend to target commanding officers and high-value military targets to send them the highest level of deterrence towards the people that do it. So again, this is all pretty normal for Middle Eastern stuff. I mean, we're pretending there's a ceasefire, even though everyone's been shooting at each other quite consistently for the last month. It's just Donald Trump calls it like lower intensity shooting at each other. So yeah, this is, to my view, it's clearly the Islamic Republic of Iran doesn't want to negotiate in good faith. They're trying every stall tactic they can. And then they'll tell Trump that they're almost close to a deal, and then they'll bomb Israel, and then they'll drag Israel into a fight, and then try and restart all negotiations.
So what will Iran actually get, Daniel, in complicating this war? I mean, we are looking at several conditions that Iran has laid forward. Reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, but, also in a way to monetize the Strait of Hormuz. Then it is seeking $24 billion as war compensation. Then it is seeking cover for its proxy as far as Hezbollah is concerned. So are these terms and conditions under no way or under no pressure? It seems that President Trump is ready to agree on that.
Well, I mean, there's some disturbing thing where, I mean, Trump seems to be tacitly agreeing to the fact that the regime's allowed to have proxies if they're allowed to, negotiate in behalf of Hezbollah in Lebanon, even though the Lebanese government signed a deal with Israel, and wants Hezbollah out. So that's already a bad precedent being set here. Again, what does the regime get? You have to think from the regime's point of view. It's about regime survival. It's not about the Iranian people. They were perfectly happy to murder 40,000 of their own people. Their people have been in terrible economic condition for decades now. A lot of these missile cities where they've stored all these missiles, they had to drain a lot of the natural lakes and fresh water from the people to build these missile cities. Yeah. So their concern over their people is zero at best. What they're really pushing for is regime survival. Yes. And they're pushing for it especially to it's fire up their base. So the base of an Islamic Republic supporter is not the average.
As far as the base of IRGC in Kharg Island is concerned, Daniel, we're getting another breaking update that too has now come under attack. So we'll just put across this news update that is now coming across as explosions that were heard on Kharg Island. And this has now been reported because the blast that just occurred off the coast of strategically important island. And what has now been said that the IRGC, which is very active in the area and was working to unclear unexploded ammunition from previous security incidents involving US and Israel. And according to reports that are now even coming in, as far as these explosions are concerned, that has now been also heard on Kharg Island. It's a very strategically located island and very important there for Iran, what we are now looking at, but militarily also speaking. And this is something which we are now getting the information and the pictures of these explosions that has been reported on Kharg Island as well. Daniel, Srinjoy and Mayank, request you to stay on with us. We just have to head into a very short break. We'll be back with the same news on the other side.